So good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. It's not August, it's July. And we are on our 9th webinar in this series. So we're 3/4 of the way through, and we are grateful to you for joining us. And we are going to be doing part 2 of our strategy dive. We did some strategy dives last time as well, and got some really great feedback from participants for our wisdom well. And we're hoping to do the same thing today on some different areas where we could learn from one another about different strategies for infrastructure improvements in information technology. So Angie, why don't you go ahead and get us started?
All right. Yeah, welcome back. We are, what are we, 2/3, 3/4 of the way through. That's math. So we've got 3 after this. I'm really happy to see you guys. I'm starting to get to know, our regulars, and it's an intimate group, but I kind of like that about this particular training of seasoned folks. Okay, so let's dive in. Today's outline is it's kind of structured a lot like the last one. Last time we talked about a different strategy dive. We looked at community engagement, was a lot of what we talked about. Today, we're going to talk about infrastructure improvements, and that's one category. And another category, data and information technology. So I'll remind you the context of what those categories really mean, but we are going to do what we always do, which open up with the reading discussion. So we had talked about a reading last time. We'll give some time to chat about it. We have a short lesson just to prime the pump on these kinds of strategies. And then we want to invite everybody to share their own experiences. Shasta is going to help me talk a little bit about some of her transportation related strategies, because she had a whole transportation related plan that I helped her on. So that was for Paula. So that'll be one example we talk about. But if you have other stuff that fit into infrastructure improvements or IT related strategies, we'd love to hear about it. We also have Josh Simmons. He's with me at Prosper Sustainably, but he's got a lot of experience building microgrids and related controls for tribes. And so he's going to talk about a project that's happening down in Southern California at the Rincon tribe. He'll join us in a little bit for that. And then we'll do what we always do, which is, we'll go into our mural, we'll have a discussion, we'll ask you some questions, and everybody gets to share more about what they know. That will turn into a wisdom well. Whoa. All right, so you all know where to find all of our resources and our old worksheet. The old worksheet gave some prompts for this particular reading. So this is, how do I say this, Shasta? Is it Ute? Oh, you're muted.
Ute,
okay. Ute Mountain. So it's their climate action plan, and I liked this plan quite a bit. I just love reading any of these plans now. I guess I'm just a big aficionado, but I thought it was interesting the way they organized some things. And this one tackles both the emission reduction side and adaptations in the same report. So there was some confusion, but we're kind of wanting you to look at sections 5.1 and 5.10. Why don't I make sure you all have access to this? I'm going to give you the link, or maybe Shasta, if you have it handy.
yeah, hang on, I'll pull it up.
Yeah, throw that in the chat so folks can open it up. I have it here open too. But yeah, so this is one of the tables from section 5.10, which is on energy. So we figure, since we're going to talk about infrastructure today, that's one thing we could review is, how does another tribe handle energy infrastructure needs? And so this is a table that's talking, I liked how they organized it, talking about observed changes, impacts, consequences of change, potential adaptation actions, possible partners and funding sources. So I thought that was a clever way to organize their adaptation activities. Section 5.1 was a little section they have on health, so we can talk about that too. But our reading discussion is, we have a few prompts, but just you can share whatever comes to you. We said, what infrastructure challenges is your tribe facing? How is your tribe currently responding to them? What are your thoughts on the tribe's selected energy infrastructure strategies from this plan, and what would you do differently for your tribe? So if anybody had a chance to look at this thing, I wondered if anybody wanted to kind of chime in with some thoughts.
Hang on a second. I'm still trying to find I'm having a terrible time with my Google Drive right now. So I'm trying to find the link to
Here we go.
share for
Got
this.
Got it right here.
There, now I got it. Oh, see?
Oh, that's funny. Jinx. So I'm gonna drag this over. We can kind of walk through this.
Yeah, and Lori has her hand up. Go ahead, Lori.
Thanks. I read this and I was thinking a lot about the tribes that are impacted by electric vehicles now, Navajo Nation being one, and how to address tribal needs and infrastructure changes that need to happen while making sure that you're not, or trying to make sure that you're not adversely impacting other tribes. And that was something that came up to me. And I don't have a solution, I just have a question.
All right. Tell us more. Like, how are they being affected?
Well, there's going to be need to be more mining. There's going to be need to be more lithium mining. The electrical vehicles are great; they don't pollute. Although in places in Ute territory, they're not going to get very good mileage because you're going to need to use the climate systems, which, you know, cut your mileage by about a third. But every EV we buy has to have a battery. And I would love to see somebody smart working towards either better batteries or a way to obtain, you know, the materials without trashing the tribes, because it just sets up what the government loves, which is the tribes to fight each other so the government doesn't have to.
Yeah, you know, Lori, that's something that's coming up a lot. And I did notice too that I think it was on the second or the third page of this. Wait, is this only 2 pages? Oh yeah, so in this chart right here, you notice that one of their near-term strategies is clean diesel. So they're not necessarily going straight for the EV fleet. And you know, a lot of that, I think, for tribes has to do with what other infrastructure they have to support the different types of fuels that are readily available. Clean diesel is better than dirty diesel, but you know, in broadly, an environmental or an electric vehicle is better than clean diesel. You know, anything that's low emission, but especially, you know, for the folks that are on this call right now, and for tribal folks in general, we don't have this kind of infrastructure to do EV. And like you said, the hype does not always match reality. Weather conditions affect the efficiency of vehicles. And so one thing I'm finding is that Americans, being who we are writ large, we want big vehicles, right? So we will take an EV that only gets, you know, or a hybrid or something that still gets worse fuel efficiency than a smaller all gasoline vehicle, you know, that gets 45 or 50 miles per gallon, like my sister's Honda Civic versus my Lexus SUV hybrid, which gets like 30 miles per gallon. But I like the seat AC. Anyway, that's something really important, I think, that people are putting into mind when they're developing these plans.
Hey, Lori, did you know that the PUC, or no, I'm sorry, the CEC EPIC program has a solicitation out for non-lithium ion battery storage?
No, but I love it.
Yeah, I mean, if that's something you're passionate about, spread the word, because they're trying to demonstrate different longer duration technologies.
Well, and we're going to be talking about today, this is what we're here for, is to talk about these kinds of adaptation strategies, what we have done, what you have done, and what we can recommend to others. Kendra.
Yeah, I agree so much with what you said, Shasta, that it's the whole changing your power source or changing what you're driving is not going to solve the climate problem.
Right.
It's reducing what we consume and thinking about how we consume and being realistic about all of that. But I struggle with that. I am not a tribal citizen. And I struggle with communicating that to people when I come from an essentially privileged background, that people who have really had hard backgrounds for at least 3 or 4 generations. And how do you say you should consume less? But then on the physical part of this, we at Chickaloon Tribe would very much like to find ways to be energy independent, and are actively looking. We have very little land, so we're really limited in whether we could put up solar or wind, but we are trying to get funding to look for, is this a good site for wind? Is this a good site for solar? Could we feed that back into our electric association? Everything's a rural co-op here. So we are looking at that, and we did, one of our tribal citizens did do a report on looking at the feasibility of changing our fleet to electric, and came up with essentially, you know what, it's cold here. If we don't heat this stuff at night, it's not worth it. So we got hybrids instead. Yeah.
Yeah, there are limitations, and hopefully the technology catches up to the existing limitations. But one thing that's occurring to me as I look at this plan, and I don't know when it was written, but if I were to do an update to our plan, which is at this point needs to be updated. I think we're at about the, are we at the 7-year mark now, or this almost the 7-year mark? Wasn't it 2016, 2017?
I want to say it might be stamped 2018, but we're due.
Yeah, and so what did we learn during the pandemic about the possibility of keeping people off the roads? So is that something we can include in some of our adaptations for reducing our greenhouse gas emissions? I would put into the plan, look at developing a work from home program for employees who do not need to be at their desk. I commute 50 miles round trip every day. And right now my tribal leadership is totally against remote work. We were in the office for the entire pandemic, which was not great, because there's a little bit of a cultural value that says, if I can't see you sitting at your desk, I'm going to assume that you're not working. But if we can change that, there are plenty of people here who do not need to be in the office. Now, can we do more of that with some tribal folks? I don't know. A lot of communities are remote, so people are living close to that community as it is, and not doing a commute like I'm doing. But I know there are people who go further than that to get to their jobs. I have a friend who works on the La Jolla res, and he's all the way down in Point Loma in San Diego, and that's about 75 miles one way. So he is able to work from home sometimes. So that's something else. We got to think about what lessons we have learned from other circumstances that can be applied and can help with these sorts of infrastructure decisions. So, and also there's stuff on here too where I'm like, wow, I'm glad I don't have to worry about things like reducing the venting and flaring of oil field gases. The Ute Mountain tribe has fossil fuel extraction as one of their main economic development engines. So that's something important to consider, that we can't just tell a tribe. And actually it was somebody from Ute Mountain Ute called me out at a Department of Energy tribal energy conference once, because I said, we should all be going to solar. I can't believe anybody is still extracting fossil fuels. And he stood up and he said, well, this is what our tribe depends on for our revenue, and nobody's going to tell me that we can't do it, because we need to do it to support our tribe. And I was like, oh God, it was so embarrassing, but I was so glad that he said that, because it gave me the information I needed to know their needs are diverse, and they can't just automatically stop extracting natural gas and oil because the tribal economy will collapse. So these are complicated things.
Yeah, and they do a good job here of explaining that, the balance here, and like that they're transitioning and that the industry is changing, but they're not ready to basically abort their revenue stream here. And it's just a balance. So this is very real. This is a very real world example of how you make this transition. Yeah. Who else? Anybody else have thoughts on these, on what they're seeing here in these strategies, how it applies to your tribe, what else your tribe is doing on energy? All right, well, we have a lot of time to kind of dive into these things because we have lots of places for more discussion. Let me get back to my slides here. And thank you for that. And if you do have time, I thought their health section was pretty interesting as well, talking a lot about heat and cooling, and all that has to do with infrastructure, right? So let's talk more. I want to just kind of wet the whistle again here on the kind of ground set a little on the topic, right? So we've been through a lot of topics up till now, our first 8 webinars where we walked through, you know, your tribal best practices and what you all have been working on, what was hard, and vulnerability assessments and adaptation planning. And then the next stage being implementation. On the right there is how we at the Tribal Climate Health Project think of the types of strategies. We just categorize them for our own function, and because it, you know, it's just helps sometimes to group things. So last time we of course went through policy planning and land use, went through what that might look like, community engagement and notification. So we're tackling 2 per session. We're going to tackle these 2 this time. Next time we'll talk about operations and management and cross-agency collaboration. So Daniel, I see your hand up. Hi, I'm glad you're here.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Sorry I haven't been around in a while. But one of the things that's come up that isn't really talked about with this, let's say, for example, this infrastructure improvement. One of the things that I began to realize is that, let's just go back like maybe 20 years when we were building our casino. So we built this huge casino, but we never really took into consideration a lot of the effects as far as emergency management. How are we going to work with the local fire stations, the local law enforcement agencies? And when you're working with state, federal, tribal, county, these are some of the things you have to prepare for as well. Water runoff, water usage. So a lot of these things come into play that we really have to work on when it comes to this infrastructure improvement. Some of the things we didn't really design before, but we're now, all these years later, starting to realize, oh, okay, now we're trying to figure this out. But as far as the hybrids are concerned, I have one, I love it. The flaw in the design with a lot of these vehicles is it would be really nice if they had charging stations, solar-based charging stations.
Yeah.
You don't have to have electric grids plugged into all these places around, you know, the map. Station solar panels. Cost would be much cheaper. And I don't need to fill up at any of the local charging stations. I live just the perfect amount of miles from home to work and back. But for those that do not, it seems to be an issue, and it can be a little expensive. But the investment to do solar panels and attach these charging stations to them, you could actually get you can turn that into a small business for the tribes as opposed to plugging into the grid. Food for thought.
Yeah, you know, I appreciate that. And I would love to hear even more about sort of how those kinds of infrastructures are starting to be developed and who's working on them, what's the challenges. So maybe let's go to this. You're making a really nice segue here for me into talking about these strategies and what they look like. So I wanted to go back to this. I mentioned last time the easy tool. Shasta, if you have that handy, or maybe I have it handy, if you can throw that link again
Sure.
into the chat so folks know where to access it. So one of the things that the easy tool does is allows you on this 3rd tab here to evaluate adaptation strategies. Not to do a commercial about the easy tool, but we're going to use it for just a second, because if all you did was to use it to go in here and help you start brainstorming actions or strategies, then you would have made my day. Because we have, I don't know, 150 or more strategies sitting in here, and it's just to get you thinking about what might be possible for your tribe. So you can filter it, but we're going to talk about, I'm going to pull a version of it up. Okay, and all you have to do, you can just filter, right? So here's all the adaptation strategy types, right? We talked about policy planning and land use, community engagement. Here's infrastructure improvements. All I did was just filter it for infrastructure improvements. And here's a whole long list of different things that can be done. And it's too small, so I'm going to go to my next slide where I pulled some of them out, but I have a lot here. And the same thing you can do for information technology. Now, if you're saying, if what you wanted to do is say, okay, I want to know infrastructure improvement that can help me with storms and flooding, you can filter for that too. Like, I have a really big storm and flooding issue. What can I do about it? Then you filtered it down a little bit further. You can get a little list. Doesn't mean you have to do all these things, just means, hey, here's some ideas. And then you can use the rest of this to help you plan out, evaluate whether or not that strategy is right for you and plan out some initial details. And here's some examples just to kind of make it a little more real. So infrastructure improvements, this is a short list of what is really hundreds of things that could be an infrastructure improvement to help you deal with fire, heat, flood, drought. I see a lot of tribes starting to think more about building emergency resilience or cooling centers. So actually, some of that is just identifying a facility, but in some cases you might actually have to build one along with storage facilities for things like emergency supplies, more water, food, cots. Another one is install backup power. So we were talking about the energy issue. So backup power is sort of the, lower hanging fruit when you're going to have a power outage, maybe a frequent power outage issue. You might go to a diesel backup system that only will last you a couple of days and has some, air quality consequences. Beyond that, you might be looking at, like we were talking about with energy storage or battery storage systems. And then beyond that, more complex is microgrids and power controls, which is what we'll hear about in just a few minutes. What Recon is working on, and I know a lot of other tribes are thinking about this because they want to be able to have control about when the power stays on and be able to have control over their loads, which just means like when they manipulate where their loads are coming from, going off the grid, on the grid, how much of their solar capacity is being used at what time. And then Daniel, I think you were talking about this, adding water storage tanks when necessary. I'd be interested in what other kind of water. I think water is a massive issue. Aside from, what kind of things you can do with policy, your treaty rights, which we talked about a little bit more, you could try to store more water. What else? What's another infrastructure improvement that actually can help you manage drought? Implement nature-based or green infrastructure to support road drainage at flood impact sites. So that might look like a swale. I'd be really interested to see, if anybody's working on wetland restoration, and that might be supporting, supporting tribes that are experiencing floods and especially road inundation that actually traps people. And then just general road improvements. So we're going to hear Shasta talk a little bit about a road extension project that came out of her transportation adaptation plan. But other tribes I work with don't even have, they may not even have paved roads. So one tribe I got to work with talked about how bad the dust got. And that being a really big issue as winds were getting more extreme and drought was getting more extreme. And just how unstable those roads were getting related to flood. And so adding gravel to an unpaved road, that's an infrastructure improvement. One tribe was thinking about building a helipad because they're so remote that getting access to emergency services is difficult. And they had a site that was going to be able to allow helicopter service to their entire region. And that was something that they could do. Another one, if it's really hot and you have people that are relying upon public transit, like buses, you can increase the amount of shelter at those hubs. Or you could construct, say you're going to construct brand new housing, you would potentially think about ways to make that resilient housing. So what does that mean? It could look like, wildfire resilient materials. It could look like extra insulation and things that are going to help keep that home cool, or really efficient cooling systems. Or if you have existing homes, you could consider rehab or retrofitting those homes. So those are some examples of infrastructure improvements, and then some examples of data and information technology. So a different topic, sometimes related though. A lot of what we see is a greater interest from tribes too in real-time automated monitoring, surveillance, and alerts. So last time we talked about the alerts, meaning like the public communication side of this kind of work, but like actually getting access to the data, the real-time information about what's changing in the conditions of your community. That requires oftentimes some level of technology. And so it might look like installing new stream monitoring gauges and having that automatically populate information into some kind of a portal that's publicly accessible. Or you probably are already all doing water quality and air monitoring. Some of you I know are doing at-risk species surveillance. That's all data gathering. And in some cases, if you can connect it to a portal, it turns into IT. Disease surveillance, we see a huge uptick in what this looks like since COVID. And we'll talk a little bit about that on my next slide. But some other examples, you might have a citizen science or observation network that's web-based. You might develop post-wildfire models and monitoring, installing an automated irrigation system, maybe to keep your agricultural crops alive, or just to manage water efficiency and drought better. I've also seen tribes work on mapping their vulnerable tribal members using GIS. So how can GIS be supportive so that when you do have a heat event or some other kind of climate event, you know where your vulnerable populations are and kind of deploy stuff quickly. Asamu, I see your hand up. Would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I have just a question on what you just said. Which tribes do you know if that have mapped their vulnerable tribal members and undertaken that? That sounds really interesting, and I think it's something to consider just in terms of like basically doing your own tribal census and having a sense where people live. And then the other thing I just wanted to double back to was this constructing resilient housing item. I know that in the Ute Mountain plan, they talked about how they were planning to build new housing and how that new housing could allow the folks who lived in it to take advantage of the different tribal benefits like healthcare and kind of proximity to support systems. And so just wanted to flag that sometimes there's some work to be done to actually create infrastructure to support the new housing being built. And that can be a whole nother item that you have to budget for. I know with the some different plans I've seen to create, new housing complexes, tribal housing complexes, that's been a challenge to get both the coordinating, getting the funding to do the infrastructure for the development, as well as getting the funding to actually build the housing. So it's definitely a big endeavor, but really, really cool to see that in the plan. And then on the data and information tech side, I think one kind of base level strategy is actually getting Wi-Fi and getting better internet access set up. And I know there's some different broadband grant programs that the state has, but just as a kind of a first step, I think sometimes that can be helpful.
Oh, totally. You know what? I wonder, I'm like, maybe I would throw broadband into infrastructure improvements, but whatever, you're right. It belongs and it's a really big deal with a lot of money out there for that kind of thing. There's a lot of money out there actually for all of this kind of stuff right now. Daniel, I see your hand up.
Per his questions, it basically one of the things that we've worked on with the tribes, and most of this was laid out during COVID, is we work to identify the different types of individuals that need help. Obviously, you have those with the elderly, and then those with extended care. And then those that come with extended care, we need to make sure whether or not they're on ventilators, and should electricity go down, how do we prepare their homes, or how quickly can we move them from point A to point B. So all of these people or these individuals have been identified. And as far as, kind of like focusing on the Ute, we're actually right now working with the Ute Mountain Ute to see how we can best assist them, because their community exists in both Northwest New Mexico and Southwest Colorado. Most of their economic funding comes out of New Mexico, but is funneled into Colorado. So we want to figure out, should there be an emergency in New Mexico, how best are we able to respond? And for those that are surrounding the surrounding communities, airflow, water flow, forests, things like that. So we're really working not only with the tribe, but with the surrounding communities, with the state and other tribal nations to figure out how we can work as a unit as opposed to separate individual tribes. And it seems to be working really well. One thing I can say for the tribes in New Mexico, the communication has really flourished. And when we began these communications, one of the things that we made clear is that we don't want to deal with politics. We want to deal with the safety of our generations, and that being just, they all identify in each tribe separately. So that was one of the things we really worked was how do we keep politics out of the situation and keep health and safety as the main focus.
I just had a quick follow-up question, Daniel.
Yeah.
What was the process of actually identifying the vulnerable individuals that you were talking about, the folks on extended care? Because I know that's been a big concern with the public safety power outages here, power shutoffs.
Okay, one of the things we have here is we have what we call CHRs. It's community health representatives. I'm sure most tribes, I don't know if most tribes across the nation, I shouldn't say that. I know those in New Mexico, we do have them. And it's their responsibility to go, in a sense, house to house and identify those individuals and the types of needs, new mothers, new families, things like that. Isolation, how far away are you from the nearest ambulance response unit, hospital, clinic, whatever it might be. What are the clinic hours, things like that. So these are things that our emergency managers have already worked on. So we have each of our communities mapped out. And should an emergency occur, we know exactly how to best evacuate these individuals and the community to safer locations. So all of these have been mapped out on paper, not necessarily in practice, but in theory. So but as far as those individuals in need, those have been put into place because during the winter storms, the fire season, when air quality is at its worst, we want to make sure that these individuals are the first to be taken care of. So the CHRs have done an amazing job here in New Mexico.
That's amazing. I would love to have something like that here.
Do you have a link, Daniel, that you could share with folks? And Osama, I've come across other tribes doing similar stuff. There's I've come across like a health safety plan where they do this kind of like identification and mapping. I think I wrote about it in that COVID report that we wrote, where we're talking about translating COVID strategies to climate change. So let me look at that for you. And I see some really good conversation happening here in the chat. I wonder, Kendra, do you want to lift this up out of the chat and into the ether?
If I can find my unmute button. Yeah, one of the things, we have a lot of things we think about with infrastructure resilience, like roads and bridges and how we're going to be isolated if one thing gets blocked.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of people are in that situation, but one of the topics that really comes up has been about storing food, because we're in the part of Alaska where nearly all the Alaska produce is grown, but we don't have a way to store it. We have a few individuals, and there's been massive interest and response when USDA puts out these micro grants to help little families build a root cellar, but there's so much response they can't fund it. So that's definitely something people have talked about. And we actually don't have traditional fishing in our area anymore. The streams don't have fish, which is really sad. And part of that is it's not necessarily climate change, it's humans that have created that problem. So we have to go elsewhere to get fish. Like literally yesterday, I was out with two other people. We were fishing for the tribe. We had an opportunity from the sport fish guy to take us down to a personal use area you can only get to by boat. It was a 3-hour journey for me to get to that place. But we got 80 fish. So now we got to bring 80 fish back, but how do you get that to the community quickly or set up a way to freeze it and all of that? So it's just finding those ways to do storage. And then we also have, I mean, I personally have been really interested in natural building. I've been pursuing it for about 3 years. I'm about to start my own house, building my own house. And as I've talked about that at work, there are other people there that are really interested in doing that and creating new homes and new offices that are underground. So when it does get hot, we can have cooler air. When it's cold, we can have warmer air and so forth. But we just aren't getting support from administration for that type of thing.
You mean
think-
those kinds of projects are ineligible or difficult to get money for? Yeah.
I don't know. They have a master plan going, but it's more, I don't know. It's when it's come up during master planning, there just doesn't seem to be interest.
Oh, administration meaning your own tribal administration.
Right. Yeah, our own tribal administration. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Well, you know, I hope you all are seeing, you might be thinking, isn't this kind of a health training? And to me, I just really like to make sure that folks are aware that sometimes an infrastructure improvement is a health improvement, right? So sometimes we hear in the, you know, if we're talking about health, we get stuck in like, this is what doctors do, right? Or, you know, the only things that are the tools in our tool belts are what a clinic can provide. And I'm like, no, the best way to protect health sometimes is to make sure the power doesn't go out. So your electrical equipment that is, or your electrical reliant equipment doesn't go out so people can get dialysis. So yeah, we're going to talk more about all this. Let's go into a couple more just examples on the IT side. I just, you know, want to kind of like bring to life a little bit more the surveillance piece. And this came out, this is just from a couple of days ago out of the AP. It's like a collaboration they're doing with GRIS on climate connections. And they had this whole really cool storyboard they created on a warming planet, pathogens and disease. And I'll throw this in the chat. It's just nice. It's a nice visual tool to talk about how vector-borne disease is changing and why related to climate change. And what I liked was this piece at the end, this little quote that says, the world has the tools it needs: wildlife surveillance networks, vaccines, and early warning systems. So these two things are really a lot of what we're talking about when we talk about IT, especially as it relates to health. To mitigate the impacts of climate-driven disease. Just how important these information technology systems are to tracking and managing outbreaks of this stuff in real time and then communicating it. Shasta, I wondered if you wanted to take a minute to talk a little bit about the transportation adaptation plan and really maybe focus on the advanced plan that we did for the design of Lilac.
Yeah, sure. So we were fortunate to get funding from California Department of Transportation, otherwise known as Caltrans. I don't know if other states have these sorts of grant resources available to communities, but I hope that they do. And with ours, we did a transportation vulnerability assessment and a transportation plan that was focused on mitigating climate impacts, or I should say adaptations to climate impacts, and identifying the usual stuff, which is terrible to say that I'm at the point where it's usual for me to say, we're going to have floods, we're going to have wildfires, we're going to have dust, we're going to have all these terrible things. But one of the really important things that we were able to do through this grant was to develop some potential projects for implementation. And we all know as tribes that that's one of the hardest things to do is get those projects up to the implementation stage and then get funding for them. But we worked also in partnership with the Humul Indian Village, which is a tribe in the southern part of San Diego County with quite different transportation needs than our own, just because of where they are and the size of the reservation versus Paula. But it was an interesting contrast. But the point is that we were, through both community input and through our modeling of potential climate effects, we determined that there were certain areas that were more in need of adaptation strategy implementation than others. And so this is one of them. This is one of the main roads that we have onto the, what we call the across the river part of the reservation. So what you're seeing in the middle here is the San Luis Rey River, which is dry most of the year. But when we get flood events, the crossing of the river over Lilac Extension Road, which is a BIA tribal road, it floods out and people can't cross it. And then even on the other side, if you are on the south side of the river, what we've labeled here as an evacuation route is often too flooded. It's a dirt road, and it's often too flooded to be passable by anything other than a four-wheel drive vehicle. And even that sometimes isn't going to work because there's runoff issues. So we've developed this strategy to implement roadway improvements, culverts for drainage, and then a more resilient crossing. What we really like to see is a bridge rather than just a dirt crossing, or what they call an Arizona crossing over the San Luis Rey, because we only have 2 other evacuation routes out of Paula, either Highway 76, which gets impacted by flooding and rock slides, or a road that goes north into the city of Temecula. Those are often closed because they are rocky and mudslidey and curvy and one lane in each direction. So by doing this strategy, we not only increase our evacuation route potential, but we also just make it safer in general for people who live on the south side of the river to be able to go along that road and get across. There is one other option for getting across the river, but again, the dirt road that leads to it tends to be washed out by, creeks and flows. So this is one I just brought up with my executive committee, our leadership, in a meeting yesterday, because they brought up this road and said, what are we going to do? And I said, well, we need to revisit our strategy, our implementation plan for this particular adaptation. And Daniel, why don't you go ahead and see your hand up?
This is actually one of the things we're working on as well. And a couple of things that you can put in. I don't know how far along you are with the plan, but some of the thoughts and ideas that I in a sense came up with on these is that, let's just say, for example, there's a storm, you have people trapped on one side of the river and cannot get any sort of help on the other side of the river. That's one concept. That's typically what everybody sees. But what you want to add in, or what you might want to add in, is, let's just say, for example, we have a group of first responders. They go across the river to help people out, and then they get trapped too. How do we rescue the first responders and the people who they went to rescue? So these are the things that you want to do. And suddenly they're like, oh yeah, well, we need to make sure that our people are going to be safe. So when they do respond.
Well, you may have noticed that right along that route, above the leftward arrow that says evacuation route, it says Paula Fire Station.
Okay.
That's our main emergency operations center. That's where our fire and ambulance service comes from. And then the little arrow at the bottom that says Palomar Medical Center, that's down in Escondido. That's a 30-minute drive away. So yeah, that's a really important point, and I appreciate you bringing that up. And super brief anecdote: years ago, there was a big flood in Paula Creek, where our fire department tried to cross Paula Creek when it was flooded, and the fire truck got washed into the creek. And our current chairman, Chairman Smith, he was the fire chief at the time, and he and his brother were both on that fire truck. And the response was the community all came out there and basically did like a rope brigade to get out there and rescue them from that truck. So I'll just bring that up and say we don't want that to happen again. And Lori, we'll give you a comment before we introduce our guest speaker.
Having seen this area, it's really interesting. And I was wondering if you could also incorporate a way to spread more of the water that comes down that creek, so you're recharging Paula's groundwater instead of having that just wash down the San Luis.
Yeah, I would love to see that. This is actually the San Luis Rey is what's called a braided stream, and so it does not tend to follow the same path every time. But the thing is that that's true for the entire valley that Paula sits within, or where we have development, and so everybody's at risk for flooding. We do have to do a little bit of control on that, but I agree with you, Lori. We're actually looking for restoration funds to have more vegetation and kind of wetland type of sink within our water, so that way there's more chance for it to recharge rather than just rush downstream. So thank you. That's a great idea.
If you want to see those materials and the stuff related to this project, we built a whole web page for transportation, climate change, and health resources. So I just dropped that link in the chat. But one of the points there is, like, if you do these kinds of plans, and you might want to include an engineer in the planning process so that you can kick the ball down the field further to actual design, so you can ready these strategies, make them prepared for funding. All right, I'm going to hand it off to our speaker. So this is Josh Simmons, President and Principal Consultant with Prosper Sustainably. I work with him, and he's going to share some information on some energy projects that he's been working on for tribes. All right, Josh, did you get access to sharing your screen?
Yeah, I was trying to find the Zoom. There we go. And here we go. Okay, so was told to kind of cut to the chase on some microgrid projects that I'm working on. Working on a variety of microgrids in particular. Trying to be relevant here. I think this is more of a meeting of doers. Like we're here about implementing things, creating solutions, and so Angie earlier mentioned that that really addressing health impacts of climate change may mean just keeping the power on. And I'll just briefly go back. I was the environmental director for the San Diego Band of Chumash Indians many years ago, about a decade ago or so. And one of the first solar installations I helped one of the residential community members with is had medical issues, and essentially it wasn't actually resilience. I think if it had been today, we probably would have put battery there, but she had an extremely high bill, and it was impacting her economics, but it was being offset. A lot of it was being used for medical devices. It's very real and critical for people on an individual level, but at a community level as well, is just ensuring that when the power goes out, that there's a place for people to go, and that's also being communicated. The community, the government is aware of who has those needs and is able to support them, helping them keep the power on or bringing them to a place where they can ensure that they have access to those devices. The motivations behind these projects include things like those types of health impacts. In California, in particular, we have a lot of public safety power shutoff events that are occurring. Fortunately, they haven't been occurring with as much frequency as they were occurring a few years ago, where communities are losing power for days and sometimes weeks at a time during red flag events where the heat is high, the winds are blowing, and the utilities are de-energizing the grid to basically reduce the risk of wildfire. And at the same time, whole communities are losing access to power, to resources, to services in rural and remote areas, and that's predominantly tribes are out in rural and remote areas. There's also economic purposes for these. Typically these microgrids are being installed to both operate in an off-grid mode when the power goes out, but as well as an on-grid mode to reduce energy costs. So a lot of them are being utilizing renewable energy sources that are offsetting that grid usage. So I'm doing a lot of work in particular with 4 tribes right now, sharing some examples with Rincon. I think it's kind of has most of the diversity right now in terms of types of projects and motivations, but we're working with Paula. We're kind of wrapping up one with San Pasqual. They just got a backup generator that we've been waiting years for due to supply chain issues, and in the earlier stages with Brona right now, and getting some funding to install some microgrids to serve community facilities there. This is one of the larger, more complex ones that's serving the chiller plant at their resorts, and that essentially is keeping it cool during the high heat days when the power shuts down. So that's something where you're seeing microgrids installed for cooling centers in these areas of high heat, so people have a place to go so they can stay cool. Otherwise, the power goes out and they don't have anywhere to go. The one thing I'll add is, ideally from a climate change standpoint, we'd be using all clean energy resources, but it's critical that these things remain online. So having what we call redundancy, ensuring that this is installed as primarily, first and foremost, powered by solar and some form of energy storage. Or in this case, the most predominant form of energy storage is lithium ion. This is using a flow battery, that's going to kind of power the facility first and foremost. But that depends upon how much energy you have stored in the battery and how much sun you had at any given moment. If you don't have enough sun, you don't have enough power in the battery, then you need to revert to backup generators oftentimes. So you want that redundancy, that if the power is not available, that goes away. or you have that still to keep the facility online, but you're also not using whatever fossil fuel generator, whether it's diesel or propane or natural gas, as little as possible, and only using it if you absolutely need it. The backup generator here, that's actually not a backup generator. It's a black start generator. The flow battery cannot come online by itself during an outage, so the diesel generator kicks on to get the flow battery going, and then it'll kick off. From an IT standpoint, these are very complex systems that need sophisticated controls to be able to communicate with one another. They're communicating the solar, the controls themselves are kind of the hub. They're communicating to the solar inverters are communicating to the battery. They're communicating to the diesel generator. They're also often communicating with the facilities they're serving. So these facilities have building energy management systems that ideally these controls are coordinating with. You don't want your HVAC systems all kind of ramping up at the same time, creating a giant spike that'll actually shut down your entire microgrid system and facility. So that's an important kind of consideration and an expensive consideration. Actually, controls get up to can be quite pricey as part of these projects. And then cybersecurity is also an important concern as well. We're talking about this for this particular project right now, but we have the IT of the facility. Usually the microgrids often have their own kind of IT, have their own network set up that isn't really tied to the one of the facility, but if it's communicating with the building energy management system and other things to coordinate, then there is some touch points, and that needs to be a consideration, because that's a vulnerability as well. As you want this thing to come online when the power goes out, but you also don't want people using it to infiltrate and somehow shut down your facilities for whatever reason. There's smaller systems. This is a fire station one, more simple kind of lithium ion type facility and system. This one's for a well pump to ensure that this is for domestic water supply for the community, and this is for the government center operations, so that all the departments that tribe needs to be available during these times are available. Angie, let me just maybe you can kind of reground me or orient me. Are there any particular aspects of these projects you'd like me to touch upon?
We're talking to a group of people that are working on adaptation and might be considering projects like this. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about, what is this going to do for this particular tribe? What kind of benefits are you going to see out of this, do you suspect? Tell them about the difficulty level and what's really challenging about this.
Yeah, so I mean, these are, initially wrapping your head around this, like I need to identify what are the critical facilities that you need to have stay online. I mean, so first and foremost, a microgrid is typically a solution for a community that's experiencing outages. They could be brief outages, they could be extended outages. But ultimately, it's a cost benefit between, do I just get a backup diesel generator, or do I try to install something that is going to have clean renewable energy and that's going to provide kind of co-benefits? The advantages of a backup generator are cheap. Generally it's cheap to install, but there's really no additional value or benefits beyond that. It's actually kind of sitting there, and it actually, to a certain degree, can be costly to just continue to maintain and operate it. This type of system, renewable energy microgrid system, is going to provide value beyond just during the outage. So energy costs are increasing likely across the country. They're very high, and with all the microgrids that I'm working on in San Diego County. We've seen spikes of 20-ish% over the past 2 years in energy costs or electricity costs. So having solar, having energy storage means you can displace the grid usage, grid costs. The battery helps you reduce your demand charges that you're otherwise experiencing. So, I'm, kind of trying to go to the sweet spot of trying to find these systems that are going to be sized in a way that are going to keep the facilities online for, covering whatever period they need to cover, not going too far beyond it, because the more energy storage you add, the more expensive, and usually the return's not as good. And then ultimately, we're typically needing grants and rebates to kind of make these things more, really kind of truly cost effective. And so, for the case of Paula, I mean, fortunately, you're near a peaker plant, so you're not experiencing as many extended outages as some other communities farther away from some of that infrastructure. In the middle of this project and working with Rincon, this was driven by their community being shut down for days at a time, shutting down really the lifeblood of their community. So, the resort they have is their economic revenue stream or their economic basis for their government operations, so that being shut down is a huge hit to the community as well. And if a community has more economic resources, they're really able to withstand, really all impacts, climate change or otherwise, to a greater degree. But during the project, we learned that SDG&E actually was installing an underground utility. They actually were undergrounding the overhead wires, reducing the likelihood of those public safety power shutoff events. So that kind of happened in the middle, and we kind of had to pivot more towards some economic projects. San Pasqual is still a bit more remote. I think they're getting some undergrounding occurring over there, but they're a little more subject to those events. Wildfires start coming in, or the high heat, high winds start occurring, and they, and then they're basically their community is getting shut down. So, I mean, I think the starting point is identify those critical facilities, try to understand what their peak loads are and their energy usage are. We do kind of preliminary modeling using some basic tools. We use kind of paid tools. We typically use energy tool base and helioscope, but there are some free tools as well. Various agencies can offer some technical assistance in kind of evaluating that. Get that initial sizing. It's pretty easy to get some rough pricing for some of these things. And then from there, you just have to then see, what there's some tax incentives that are now available that weren't available before with the Inflation Reduction Act. There's now a direct pay option that tribes can get, even 40 or even 50% potentially back as instead of a tax credit on taxes, you actually can get a direct pay to the tribes. So that's making these projects actually economic now. And so, now is kind of the time to really consider this as a viable option.
Josh, there's a couple of comments here in the chat with questions for you. So from Lori, she says, Josh, does this come with IT training for the tribes? Is that external?
So, it's really everything's subject to negotiation. So when we're working with, and that's one thing really to consider is a lot of times tribes are really, any community or client may say, okay, well, I'm going to get a contract with somebody to install this system. And they install the system, but they didn't consider the operations and maintenance of it, or even at minimum, the basic operations and maintenance training, which would include, IT considerations and stuff like that as well. So that's kind of a critical thing to ensure that you're factoring in, and including in the economics and the cash flow. The return is ensuring that you understand, like, what is it going to take to, say, wash the panels, keep them operating optimally, having somebody checking the batteries and their performance. We've seen, even in this project at Rincon, they had a 1 megawatt solar array installed about 10 years ago. And, facilities directors have changed. There's been turnover there. It's kind of, there wasn't, I think, an ongoing operations and maintenance plan, and issues started happening and people lost sight of it. Weren't really, there wasn't data available on how well they're performing or not. So right now we're in the process of, they were tracker systems, we're in the process of getting trackers replaced. There were some damaged panels. There's all these things now that we're trying to unwind, and there was lost years, really, months to years of production in some of the arrays because there wasn't ongoing operations and maintenance. But you would want to ensure that as part of that initial contract for installation, you have an inclusion of some operations and maintenance training, at least basic, even if you do have an O&M provider, so you have an understanding of the system and how to kind of monitor it. And ultimately, ideally, you're having a 5 to 10 year plus with renewable terms on operations and maintenance by a third party that's going to come out and do things to keep these systems optimally functioning, or at minimum, at least remotely monitoring them. Because then, through the remote monitoring of their performance, of their inverters, you can see, this is the expected production and this is what it's actually doing. In some cases, oh, this inverter is not showing anything. The inverter might have just failed. So somebody needs to go out there and check it. Does it need to be replaced? And so, and you can seek to have somebody, do more training for your tribe if there's the need and the capacity to do so, to better understand, to be able to diagnose those things as well.
Great. Another question here from Asamu. How long did each of these projects take from conceptualization to actually be built, assuming they are already built?
So we're at various stages. I mean, they always take way longer than you expect. The saying in the industry is that you've seen one microgrid, you've seen one microgrid. So microgrids, it's in particular, they can be complex. They have unique kind of site condition considerations. The Rincon ones are a bit more complex because we're pursuing third-party financing for it, which means a tax investor is coming in, and then it's going to have a PPA rate. That tax investor is going to actually have responsibility over the operations of the system. You know, it's one of those things where I would plan for probably at least 2 years from conceptualization to kind of what we call COD, commercial operation date, when the thing is fully operational and online and functioning. Certainly, if you can, you know, there's ways to streamline that and move it faster, but there's also supply chain considerations too. It's hopefully starting to ease up, but we've been seeing for some of these larger systems, switchgear. Switchgear is a major electrical component in these systems that's been taking a year, has had a year of lead time to order. And you can't really order the switchgear until you've done some of the advanced engineering of the project and had kind of sign off from the utility on the kind of basic engineering of the system. So, you know, it may take you 6 months to get to that and get that approval from the utility. And then from there, you're ordering something that may take another 12 months to just get there. And then, you know, once it's there, the installation itself can take, you know, a few months to complete.
So at least a couple of years. Anyone else do you want to raise your hand? Anyone else? Any other questions for Josh before he has to run back to his other meeting? No. All right. Well, we wanted to give you kind of a little bit of a deeper dive into some kinds of infrastructure or IT related projects, and hopefully that is useful. You get a little bit of a taste for what it would take to do these kinds of projects. So thank you, Josh, for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Great. Thanks. Have a great day.
All right, so let's move on into our discussion piece. So this is our time to really dive more deeply into what's going on with you and trying to capture some of your knowledge. And so we are going to use Mural like we always do. Shasta, do you want to drop the Mural link into the chat? Okay, so, and I'm going to throw the Mural up on the screen here in just a minute, but we're actually going to take the same questions that we took last time. We're just going to apply them to the 2 different categories. So we're going to talk about what adaptation strategies in this category, so we're going to talk about both of them, have you implemented? What needs is the strategy aiming to address? What lessons are you learning? What worked or didn't work? And what advice would you give to other tribes? And then what other strategies in the category are you interested in trying to implement, and what would you need to implement it? So that's the discussion topic. Let me drag over the Mural. Let me know, everybody, if you're having any trouble getting in. You can just sign in as a visitor. And then when you're here, now Shasta has heroically figured out how everybody can actually drop a Post-it. So you should be joining as a visitor. And so if you just double click anywhere under either topic 1 or topic 2, it should pull up a little Post-it note for you that you can then drag open and type things into the Post-it. And so you should show up as like well, I'm seeing here we have a visiting seahorse and a visiting crab, visiting turtle, a visiting, also that's a bumblebee and not like a fruit fly. And then there's me. And so, you know, Angie and I will be typing things into this, and, you know, so you can either go straight to the link and everybody will see what everybody else is seeing in the Mural, or you can look at our shared screen here. And either way, you're going to get the view that you need. And in fact, I see people buzzing around and moving their cursors about. And so, yeah, let's just jump right in. And if something jumps into your mind and you're just brainstorming, feel free to go ahead and add it. And Angie, can we, oh wait, no, I'm doing this. I'm gonna change the screen size a little bit so that our wisdom well is off the page, and that way we can see a little bit better. Oops. I'm sharing my screen, aren't I? Am I
You
doing that?
are,
Okay.
but we can also go directly to the actual page and people can start putting things in. I'm trying to increase the size of this. Usually Tina does this, but Tina's on vacation meeting her new baby niece, I think.
Oh.
So yes, that's very wonderful. And
Does
so
anybody
she's
have
not with us.
questions about how to use this tool or any issues? Okay. Well, let us know, but let's start here. Let's start with topic number 1. I mean, jump in anywhere, but for the discussion out loud, let's walk through infrastructure improvements. So we've talked about quite a bit of them already.
Here we go.
What adaptation strategies in this category have you implemented? So we've kind of talked about some theoretical ones, some options. What have you done? You can raise your hand or just unmute yourself when you're ready. We're a small enough group. And then, all right, I'm seeing some folks putting some stuff here, added solar to Biz Enterprise. Okay, so we're doing solar. Whoever put that in, are you guys considering storage along with that? Or maybe you're not able to unmute.
I think, is that you, John? Because I just saw you unmute.
Oh, no, it wasn't us. Ours, we're totally off grid. So all these infrastructure improvements that we're talking about now, I'm assuming are for on-grid applications. But
Wow.
they are the exact same things that we had to do in order to live off grid, having a hybrid system, which included solar generation with a generator backup, and at each of the homes, and even at the wellheads, and any improvements that we made to prepare for wildfires and what have you. It was all off-grid application with these type of infrastructure improvements that we're talking about now.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a whole different set of challenges and a whole different set of infrastructure needs, I imagine. Are you trying to get on the grid somehow? Are you trying to get grid tied and connected, or what are you?
We are. It's just that we're surrounded by other federal lands, and the grid has not progressed through those federal lands. We're in a unique situation for California in that the end provider of power in our area is a co-op that gets power from a larger company. So they have their own set of issues that they have to deal with, and getting permits from Forest Service and BLM to go through their lands to get to our reservation just hasn't been something that was high on their to-do list for years, but then it's also become rather difficult to get those. So we are in the process of actually, we just sent out an RFP to put in microgrids on the reservation that'll assist with providing more power to homes and infrastructure on the reservation.
Right, yeah, you just have your own little distribution system and have a lot more controls over how it goes. That's exciting. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of energy stuff here. Solar, and people are talking about EV chargers now need replacement. Okay, so some folks have already installed some chargers, and now sounds like they might be needing to be replaced. Other folks are trying to add more vehicle charging stations, a backup generator. Yep, most charts I come across at least have a backup generator. I feel like that's like, you got to get that at least if you want to stay afloat. And then the question is, what do you put on a backup generator, right? So maybe somebody, whoever put this down, what do you have on your backup generator? What kind of critical things did you feel like needed to have backup generators? Is that somebody that wants to speak up? That's
Yeah,
okay.
I'm going back and forth between here and both the Zoom and the mural to see if folks are putting stuff into the chat. But let's see. Yeah, so some folks are having a little bit of a technical challenge using mural, so they're putting stuff into the chat, which is great. So Lisa Gover added that infrastructure needed in the community is additional vehicle charging stations. And Lori, that for IT, Is that the other side? Yes. Tribe needs to be able to access and update all systems. So Lori, can you expand on that a little bit? Like what kinds of systems are you talking about?
Everything from monitoring, flood monitoring, water monitoring, all of their adaptation systems. I'm working with a tribe who got a grant and did a really wonderful online water and air monitoring system, but they can't update it at all.
Oh,
And the contract's done. So it's really great as of 3 years ago, but they still have data going someplace they don't know, and they have no way to access it.
yeah,
And,
that's a big one.
Yeah.
What about, I want to suggest something, and I'd love to hear people's thoughts on this. That might be a little bit, beyond the umbrella here, but thinking about both IT and infrastructure improvements. What about things like both GIS capacity and also access to like local governments layers for things like habitat types and flood zones and things like that, to be able to plan for where your infrastructure is going to go? And so I ask that because I don't know how many people have a GIS person on their staff. We do, we're very fortunate. But if you don't have that, or if you're like me and you're completely baffled by it, so anybody want to unmute and talk about whether they've got GIS and if that's helping them with their infrastructure planning? Or should I call on somebody? Should I call my friend Lisa since she can't participate in the mural?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sometimes you won't be able to, it's muffled and all of that kind of thing. Can you ask me the question again?
Do you all out there have a GIS department? And,
Oh, yeah, yeah, we do.
You do? And does that help you with your planning for climate adaptation, like infrastructure projects?
It will. Yeah, I'm new and we're starting up a new program. So yes, that'll be part of the interactions we'll have is with our GIS department. We don't have an in-house person, but we're working on, we have several of us. In fact, a number of us that can use the ArcGIS, but we have some restrictions on being able to access the licenses. And so we're working on that. We expect that to get taken care of here soon.
Excellent. And, and Lisa, I know that you've got experience with several tribes. And when you used to work at Campo, I would imagine that there were fewer resources. And so it was more of a challenge.
Oh, well, yeah, I was the map person. Well, not just me, but there were two of us that could do the GIS stuff and did it. And actually got layers from every place else. But you mentioned something that I think is a fabulous tool that I just saw yesterday, and it's on the Fish and Wildlife Service website, where you can go navigate to your reservation lands and draw a polygon, and it applies the species of concern, endangered species, waters, wetlands, and something else. And you can just do it on your own without any other tools than your internet.
Wow. Do you have that link close to hand?
I can find it fairly quickly. I'll slap it in the
that's great.
I'll slap it in the chat.
Yeah, there's so many resources out there that sometimes I get overwhelmed. And, I find new things and I get super excited by them. In fact, yesterday I was on a podcast recording and I don't even remember the organization it was for. But one of the guests is at UCLA and she shared a map that they have for high heat areas that is updated in real time. And so, I was like, whoa, that's terrific. Let's talk. But anyway, so earlier in the conversation, before we got to the mural, Tim from Grayton Rancheria had mentioned this concept of community resilience hubs. And that's something that there's funding for, grant funding available for in California. But Tim, I wonder if you could, are you still with us? Yes. If you could talk a little bit about this concept of the resilience hubs, because I think that's something that fits under the infrastructure topic.
Sure, Shasta, thank you for allowing me to talk, and good morning, everyone. Tim Campbell, Grayton Rancheria. We're in Sonoma County, and I'm the grants administrator. We're also working on a hazard mitigation plan. So just looking ahead at what are those strategies and or facilities that could support both the tribe and our extended community during times of need. And what we've seen in the past few years, especially with massive wildfires in our areas, is all these resources get stood up, but then 3 to 4 months down the road, they all disappear. And what I'm specifically looking at, as Shasta mentioned, now there is state funding and some other funding coming out, is how do you fund either a facility or an operation, perhaps on a year-round basis, that one is available during a time of emergencies, like a power outage, a heat wave, extreme weather, that kind of thing. Like, so most places would set up like a cooling center or a temporary relief center or like even a shelter. But then how do you maintain that during kind of blue sky conditions when everything's okay, whether it be workshops or educational facilities or just a place for community members to meet for something? And what would that involve in the concept of how do you approach planning to get that off the ground? What type of funding would you need? What type of staffing would you need? Is it kind of as an as needed basis? But the facility in essence is ready to go in the future when there's an instant for that need. So you've got power, you've got backup power, you've got supplies on hand, you've got PPE on hand, you've got those kind of that stuff in place. And then at the same time, you're bringing along staff to train them to get them up to speed so that they could be brought into the role as either a disaster service worker or even supportive help, with, hey, I need help setting up the shelter. Or, hey, we're gonna open up things today and we need help putting, making 200 sandwiches or something like that. So something very basic, but just to get us started, because our economic enterprise here at the tribe, we have a casino and a resort. It's getting really busy right now. So trying to schedule stuff or ask for space over there is getting quite tight. And then we're also doing a major expansion of our facility too here for the next 5 years. So things are just really hectic over there. So just even thinking about somewhere off site that could help fit those needs. And I really like that approach that both funding agencies and governments are looking at with climate adaptation and the needs to better prepare for the future, is having something to support those community needs. Sorry I went off, but that's basically in a nutshell. Right now,
No,
it's a
that's
concept,
great.
but I really want to take this forward. And I think this could be something that can be replicated in other tribal communities, and the communities can call it whatever they want. It's just like the place to go to, as opposed to where you would normally go, kind of thing, and feel welcome and trust. It's a trusted place. It's a safe space. All those factors that go into that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. I really appreciate that. And I'll say from a personal workplace standpoint for me, I'm looking at the community resilience centers. We have a couple of spots where we do cooling zones. We have a gym, we have our Paul administration building, we have the casino, which are places that have backup power in case there's a power shutoff. But I would like to do a dedicated climate resilience center where my department can also be housed. That's where the selfish part comes in, because I'm running out of space. And that's kind of sad to say, because I have a large office, but I have a big staff, and we're bringing more people on to do some of this work. And so if we had a dedicated space that we are right there on site, so that when we do have high heat events like we're having right now, we're there to be able to tend to the people who are coming in and not having to tell them, just go hang out in the basketball gym, or, pull up a chair and just sit in our big downstairs event center, or, and honestly, even though the casino provides our revenue, I'm not a big fan of telling people to go and hang out in the casino. There's issues with that too. So, Tim, you mentioned you're going to be applying for that Resilience Hub grant. For those who are in California, that's it's not due, I think, until September, but you had to get your pre-application proposal in by June 16th. So there's also the new BIA Tribal Resilience Grant solicitation just opened, and that I got an email about that this morning. So that might be one that I explore for some building implementation or building renewal. But anyway, that all has to do with both infrastructure and IT needs, because it's more infrastructure to help people. But to me, the next question becomes, Oh, thank you, Lori. And I can always work remotely. Yes, there is that. I wish. There's the question of broadband access, and I put that under needs for IT. We know that that's a big issue for tribes. And I've shared with the group before about our own emergency response system that is text-based and email-based. So as long as you have cell service, you can get our emergency alert texts. But we want to do more outreach that is online, which is kind of where our young people are living these days. But if you don't have broadband and you have limited access to regular internet, that's a huge problem. So I wonder if anybody is taking advantage of funds for broadband. I know the federal government is doing more, but is that an issue for anybody who's on the call right now?
Or is it something that somebody's been successful at, right? Like
That, yes. Yeah. How did you make it happen?
Yeah.
You see, nobody is unmuting, so I'm looking at over here to see if anybody's going to volunteer. You know what? I'm going to put you on the spot, John Gomez, because you said you're totally off grid. So what's your internet like out there?
Our internet is spotty. Once again, I think I mentioned that we have a end provider who's a co-op. They also put in what's called ANZA Connect, which is a wired system, but it only goes to certain places within ANZA. AT&T, Verizon, spotty, especially based on the location of the reservation and the inability to have a direct line of sight to any of the existing towers. So we've had to create a relay with ANZA Connect that we are trying out right now that provides some Wi-Fi to the existing homes. But as far as the infrastructure, such as our wellheads and some of the other places we'd like to have internet at, especially for security cameras and whatnot, it doesn't work good enough to rely on those systems for information. So we have to actually go up and get the information ourselves from what's saved on the internals that are there. But we're working on it. They're trying to figure out a way to get something closer that'll have a better range to the reservation and to the different areas of the reservation. So it's a process.
Yeah, that sounds really challenging, and it reminds me of some of what we had to deal with in Paula before we got a, what do they call it, T1 line.
Yeah.
And even then, you know, that's not as good as having full access to broadband. So yeah, you've figured out a way to manage it, but I'm sure you'd like it to be more reliable and less labor intensive.
Most definitely, and not only that, but expensive.
Yeah.
You know, we'd like it to be cheaper and more reliable would definitely help. So.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. Kendra, what about you? What are your shortfalls on the IT side and internet and what have you for your village?
Well, we're on the road system and we're completely integrated into the white community. So it's a little different situation for us. We have some of the same challenges that John was talking about. We do have areas that have very little cell signal and no internet. At our offices, it's a complicated situation, much of which I can't talk about online.
Understood.
Yeah, our servers are internal. Security is an overly extreme concern for them. If we work remotely, we have to be on a VPN, and many of us, I'm off grid personally.
Yeah.
The the VPN is simply inoperable because it's so slow and it takes so much of my satellite data. I cannot use it. I know other people who have hardwired internet. It's also very slow for them. But this isn't an internet issue. It's an issue of, can we do work from home at all? But many of our people have to travel for work. So I don't know, that becomes kind of frustrating, but we do have a lot of people that don't have broadband. You know, we rely on our electric company to provide all that, and they just haven't gotten out to most communities. And there are simply a lot of people that want to be off grid. So
Yeah.
it's kind of complicated. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It sounds complicated. And I see that Ryan put into the chat that the Ho tribe is off grid and uses Tesla Starlink. Fun fact, you can see the Tesla rockets taking off from where I live. And last night I jumped onto Nextdoor, the community, social media thing, which is another story in itself. But anyway, all these people were like, "Did you see that? Did you all see that? What is that? It's a UFO." No, it was a SpaceX rocket taking off with 15 Starlink satellites from Vandenberg Air Force Base, and you can see it. It's like a giant comet moving through the sky. And the first time I saw it, I was like, "Cool! The invasion has started. The alien invasion." But no, unfortunately, it was just the alien Elon Musk and his Starlink satellites. So, but hey. That's something that's brought broad or internet to a lot of areas that can't otherwise access it. And Ryan, that's fascinating. I actually did not know that the Ho tribe was off grid. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And if you want to come on off mute and tell us anything more about Ho or any of the other tribes in your area and their circumstances, that would be great.
I wonder if you can't.
Oh, no, I see you're unmuted, Ryan. But we can't hear you, so that's okay. Maybe she'll come back to us later. Yeah, Kendra says that, no, that's okay. We have a lot of mountains that make satellite internet difficult. Can Starlink work? I don't know. If you send a response and ask Elon Musk, he'll send you a poop emoji. Apparently that's what happens when you send, seriously, if you send, it's actually Twitter. If a reporter sends Twitter a request to their media Twitter account, they respond with a poop emoji. So yeah, I don't know.
Hilarious.
I'm glad that I said that on this recording, so it's here for posterity.
We'll add that to the wisdom mouth.
Lisa says that a couple tribes in the Northwest are beta testing Starlink. So yeah, I mean, it's a useful thing, despite the fact that it comes from a person I don't like. Sometimes that's just the sacrifice that you have to make. So
I'm gonna add this to resources.
Yeah, I'm glad to see all this. This is great stuff that everybody's contributing to our two areas here. So thank you.
I wonder if something that we haven't really talked about. We talked a little bit about various surveillance. I know the tribes are really good about air quality monitoring, but I'm kind of curious if people have, is there innovations? Is there further advancement happening in air quality monitoring? Because things are getting rough out there with smoke. And then I just moved, apparently, sadly, to very close to the epicenter of the worst air quality in the nation. And I'm checking all the things all the time. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm wondering what people, what are folks doing out there? A lot of the bad air quality that's out there is coming in from big urban areas that the tribes didn't create that problem. They're just the recipients because it flows inland, and for us, it flows next to the mountain that gets stuck. So you can't resolve it yourself because it's other people driving in the urban areas that need to resolve stuff, but you can at least monitor and then alert your communities. And I'm wondering what folks are doing there.
So Kendra, go ahead.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I found, just finishing up kind of a scoping report for our community on climate related things. And one of the things I discovered is we don't have monitors. So we have very few air quality monitors, period. We have 2 pollen monitors in the entire state, which is, you know, like what, 20% of the United States, something like that, our area. It's one in Anchorage, one in Fairbanks. And we know pollen is increasing. And apparently it's really difficult to monitor dust particles. Like one of our concerns is silt coming off a glacier and road dust and that sort of thing, which we've already heard here. So if you have ideas on how to monitor dust, that would be great. But yeah, those are some of the things that I learned is we're going to be putting that out in our report is we just need more monitoring, period.
I don't know about this monitoring, but does anybody on the call? Oh, Lori.
I was scratching my head.
Oh, you know it well. You're talking about Claremont, not dust monitoring. Okay.
No, I don't know about dust monitoring, but I know who I would ask. I would ask an Owens Valley tribe, since they do a lot of dust monitoring of dust off the now dry, thank you, LA, Owens Lake. And one of the highest single source of particulate matter in the United States. Yeah.
There's a lot of places where you could get air monitoring data that's, you know, specific for tribes or work on this issue. So the NTAA, the National Tribal Air Association, if you're not part of that, then it's something worth following at least and getting onto their mailing list. And this is becoming more and more of an issue that I think we're going to hear more about and hopefully get more resources for, because we're reading all these articles about how people can't go outside because of the drift of Canadian wildfire smoke and what it's doing to children's summer camps. They can't go outside and do their camp activities, which sort of baffles me because I never went to camp in the summer. I just went outside and like roller skated down my hill and hoped for the best. But that's an old woman, get off my lawn kind of response to kids going to camp. But it's terrible, even if you're not going to camp. Kids and people in general are really being affected by this. So there are air quality monitoring places, websites where you can look up the conditions in your community. And then EPA also has a flag system for tribes, and I think actually for all communities, where you can choose community areas where you can put out the flags that correlate with the different colors for the air quality index. So, you know, red obviously being, you know, high risk, you know, green being everything is fine. And it's just cute little flags. And so you could put them outside your fire station, put them outside your tribal administration building, put them by the school. So the kids see them, the teachers see them, and the parents and caregivers see them when they come to pick up their kids. Or like Ryan mentioned, there's the purple air monitors that you can put up that are low cost air quality monitors and be able to do your own real-time air quality monitoring in your community. And if you're not taking advantage of EPA's Air 106 grants, those are grants for expanding capacity for air quality monitoring, or find out if anybody else, any other tribes, if you've got somebody close to your region, has a program. So my air quality guy right now is up on the La Jolla Reservation teaching the kids up there about how to build your own air quality monitor, because he's a tech nerd and he figured out how to build his own monitor with parts that you can order off Amazon, and then develop a coding to have it show up on your website. So we are working on all that here at Paula as well. So we are building out a community environmental health and just a climate change dashboard that's going to be a one-stop access point for our community to look at it and look up things like not just air quality and immediate conditions, but also things like drought forecasting, so that we can help encourage people to do water conservation, and what are the health risks and what are some of the ways that they can mitigate health risks from high heat, from wildfire smoke, how to build a little air quality filter with a box fan and some easy tools, you know. So some of it is really a DIY kind of a thing. And we're also hoping, and I'm sorry, I'm not typing any of this into the mural because I'll have access to it later, but doing more citizen science and community science with tribal members. And that's something I'm hoping to get the kids involved in so that they can have a little app where they can report, I saw a snake today, or I saw that there's, the creek where I play is actually not flowing today, or and make it a game for them. If you gamify things, people will participate. And so that's what we're hoping to do. So we get those real-time reports, and sometimes those are actionable things that we can help respond to if somebody needs us. So that's part of an IT outreach strategy.
Yes. Ryan's adding EPA Region 9 gives EPA Region 10 gives purple air monitors, and National Indian Health Board is giving away air filters for tribes. So that's a good resource. Thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, and I hear what you're saying, Kendra, too, about it's not very accurate. I think it's not accurate, especially for compliance purposes. So if you're doing compliance air monitoring, you need real equipment. But I do think that they give you enough of an idea that if the air quality is bad, the purple air is going to tell you. And I'd rather err on the side of it saying it's worse than it is, just to be on the safe side. Maybe if it airs the other way, then we're not good.
I find it challenging to understand the trends. Like sometimes what I want to know is like, how long is it going to be bad? And so there's forecasts for like a day based on some model, but I want to know, like, am I like, this is going to suck all summer long? And like that kind of information has been really challenging to find for like life planning purposes. Then, it makes me think about the infrastructure side. So, how much are people doing like HEPA filters in homes and things like that? Like that's one thing that could be done is to like install, because as heat increases, we're going to see more ozone, PM 2.5 and PM 10, smoke and dust, like all of that's on the rise.
I think the answer to your question though, Angie, is yes, it is going to suck also.
Yeah, that's the answer I've concluded also. It stinks in the morning with PM 2.5, it stinks in the afternoon with ozone.
Well, and beyond that too, we're talking about a lot about air and heat and those kinds of things. Obviously internet access, but I'm thinking about our friends and colleagues who live in coastal regions, where what it made me think of is that after we have a rainstorm in Southern California, you get these warnings about not going into the ocean because there's a lot of runoff, and the runoff has a lot of pollutants. So if you've got a harmful algal bloom, or you have shellfish that might be unsafe to eat as a consequence of toxic algae, there's got to be a way to get that information out to your tribal members as well, and so Ryan, I know that you weren't able to unmute and speak, but I would imagine that that's an issue for you up in the Pacific Northwest. And I wonder do you know if there is a tribally focused warning system for letting tribes know that they shouldn't be harvesting shellfish at certain times? Yeah, and I see that you're unmuted, but we're still not hearing you, unfortunately.
Probably we'll try chat again. I
can tell you that OEHA for California, OEHA does the shellfish warnings, and we do not reach out to tribes. I'm pushing that we do, but we currently do not.
Yeah, well, and the thing about the beach warnings is that's something that comes out at a county level. But that's something I would like to integrate into my warning system, because when it's 100+ degrees in Paula, people want to go to the beach because it's in the 70s or 80s at the beach. But if we've had a summer rainstorm and there's been a lot of pollutant runoff, especially down south, right on the border, the Tijuana River is one of the most polluted waterways in the country. And because it's an international river, it's challenging. But anyway, you don't want to go in the water down there. It's basically raw sewage that's coming right out from the river. So yeah. That's okay, Ryan. We will look for the algae bloom information, but that's I think that's something that tribes should consider, is having their own internal, here's an algae bloom that's happening, and don't eat the shellfish. And this is for Angie, you make a good point. For how long? Oh, and that's what made me think of the beach warnings here in San Diego, is that they will say, don't go in the water for the next 3 days. It's very specific. Yeah. And I wonder if it's possible to do that kind of forecasting for air quality with a range of time when it might go back to safe levels. That's a great question that I don't know the answer to.
Well, hey, this has been super good.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff in here. We're going to translate all this into a wisdom well that will, we'll keep this, we'll distribute it for other tribes to help them as well. If you think of anything else, drop it in. You'll have access to it, especially like resources. Thanks for everybody for dropping in resources in the chat and in the mural. Really helpful. Even the air purifiers, which I need. Let's see. Let's go back to our slides. I think we can wrap up maybe a few minutes early. How does everybody feel?
That'd be great, because I have another meeting that starts right at 12 and I want to grab a snack.
Right. All right. Let me get us back on over. Well, we have had some good conversation. So yeah, just thank you for continuing to come to this. We've got 3 more left. The next one, when we meet in August, is going to be the 3rd of 3 strategy dives, where we're going to cover those last 2 categories. We're going to talk about operations and management and intertribal or interagency collaborations. And the reading that we're suggesting in advance of that to kick off that conversation is a weird one. I'm suggesting we read the BIA branch of Tribal Climate Resilience 2022 Annual Award Summary. Which is really just like being a voyeur and snooping in on what everybody else got funded to do. But it's kind of fun because you can see what's a successful BIA Tribal Resilience grant look like, and what are some of the cool stuff people are doing, because now that award funds not just, it used to just fund training and planning, and in the last couple of cycles funds implementation in a pretty big way. So you can actually see folks funding real strategies, real adaptation strategies. So I think it's worth a look, and it's actually a really good example too of tribal consortiums coming together to work on things together. So you can see where folks are doing that really formally with a grant application. And then we'll talk all about it. And on that note, like Shasta mentioned, we're just wanting to alert you that that funding did become available. So the BIA 2023 BIA Tribal Resilience Program grants went live really recently. And it will be due, you said October what? Do you remember? It's October 2023. So you have a little time. But yeah, it's planning, training, which is what we'll go for, I'm sure. And then implementation. So that, I mean, this is one of the best places to go if you're looking to do more planning and if you're looking to do implementation. And with that, you have the worksheet number 9. Feel free to fill in their reflection and look at the discussion questions for the next reading. Shasta, is there anything you want to say at the end here?
No, just that I appreciate all of you, and I am really glad that you are continuing to join us. And you know, if there are times that you've missed, that's okay. We're just glad to see you coming back, and I'm grateful for all of the hard work that you do, and just sending everybody a big climate hug, because I've been kind of bummed out this week reading a lot of bad news, and it makes me feel good to know that there's great people like all of you who are in the trenches with us. So thank you. Thank you for that.
All right. Take care, everybody. See you next month.
Bye.